Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on how to achieve accurate, trusted patient data with the new data quality framework from Health and Human Services Office of the National Controller for Health IT, or ONC. The ONC chose CMMI Institute's Data Management Maturity Model as the basis for their Patient Demographic Data Quality, or PDDQ framework, for its fact-based approach and effective, sustainable processes that will help healthcare organizations minimize the number of duplicate records to improve patient safety. Our speakers today are the authors of the content of the PDDQ, CMMI Institute's Melanie Mecca, Director of Data Management Products and Services, and Jim Halcomb, DMM Practice Leader. They will cover the following topics in the next 45 to 50 minutes. Healthcare industry challenges with patient demographic data, why the DMM was selected as the baseline reference model for the PDDQ, how the PDDQ was developed and the content included in the framework, how the PDDQ benefits healthcare provider organizations, industry implications of the new framework, how to use and access the PDDQ, and finally, how CMMI Institute can help. The remaining 10 minutes of this webinar will be reserved for questions, and if you have a question, please submit one through the control panel on the right side of your screen. Thank you, and with that, I will turn it over to Jim Halcomb.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining the webinar. We're going to kick things off here with what the problem is. It's duplicate records that are a pervasive problem in the healthcare industry, and they have been for a number of years. And as the industry has grown and become more dependent upon data, it's become even a bigger issue. Recent research has already pointed out that 86% of healthcare practitioners have witnessed or know medical error that was the result of patient misidentification. So this is a huge problem. It's leading to patient safety implications, as well as it's just a very costly problem for the healthcare industry. It's estimated that that the average hospital has about 8 to 12% duplicate records. And just to point out, what a duplicate record is, it's there could be multiple sources of a patient's information that cannot be accurately linked to each other, or you could have even duplicates within the same database. So it's basically the same patient is entered more than one time in multiple or even one system, and it makes it very difficult to know all of the things that a practitioner or a biller needs to know about the total record for a given patient. So 8 to 12% of those, and as many as 10% of incoming patients are misidentified. So that's a pretty significant problem. And of course, it's impacting how sharing that patient data between providers that don't ordinarily have systems that would be made to link to each other. And that increases the likelihood for health information exchanges. That's what HIEs are. It duplicates, it increases the likelihood of duplicates for those due to the defects in these master patient indexes. There are preventable medical errors, misdiagnosis by not having either the correct information, or you could have incorrect or wrong dose of medication. Those things have been, for example, there have been indications of a wrong weight that's entered, and so sometimes the dosages are based upon the weight of the patient, and if that information is incorrect, someone could overdose. Incorrect blood types, allergies that aren't known, repeated diagnostic tests. These are just some examples, but the actual issues go on and on and on. And the cost to correct these duplicates sometimes go as high as $1,000. So you add that up to 8 to 12% of duplicate records. That can add up quite significantly for healthcare organizations, and as a result, claims can be rejected, and therefore services are rendered but not paid for, and it increases the risk of lawsuits because obviously when patients receive erroneous care or wrong care, things they don't need, that's an open door for a lawsuit. So improving data quality in general, and then also specifically for patient demographic data. And when we say demographic data, it's essentially all of the different attributes that describe what we need to know to uniquely identify a person who's a patient, so demographic, male, female, address, et cetera, and so forth. All those things added together that help us understand or uniquely identify a patient across systems and throughout processes. So that's what we're aimed to help improve is the quality of that data. By doing so, what will happen is that there'll be a decrease in operational risk. So what does that mean? That means that as the data is flowing through organizations and between organizations, there will be less rework, and every time a person is trying to improve the data to move it from one process to another process, from one system to another system, there's always an opportunity for human error. So those human errors then lead to patient care errors, which can be, as I mentioned, very costly. So improving the quality of the patient demographic data will, as a result, reduce operational risk. Obviously, as we reduce the amount of rework of manually addressing data issues, will result in more operational efficiency. So there's definitely a benefit, a cost benefit that'll happen because, as I mentioned, that $1,000, upwards of $1,000 per defect, that savings can be very quantifiable and contribute quite significantly to the bottom line. It'll also improve interoperability and data integration. So what do I mean about interoperability and data integration? So interoperability is think about the movement of data between organizations. So between providers and payers and patients, having the data flow from and within and between these multiple constituents within the delivery of healthcare is one of the main larger aims, and improving the quality of the data by adopting standards and improved data management practices is going to enable that data to flow across the patient life cycle more effortlessly, and therefore improve the quality of healthcare. It's also going to improve staff productivity. Most people that we've worked with don't really enjoy fixing data. There's some who see that as becoming a significant part of their job, but it's usually not a part of anyone's job description, so to speak. So it'll improve anyone's ability to do their job if there are standards that help improve the quality of the data. And then what's going to happen is that there'll be an increased awareness around data quality itself. So that'll help to contribute to and follow the processes that are needed for everyone to be participating in order to improve the patient identity integrity, which is the main goal. Next slide. Thank you. So
now we're going to talk a little bit about how the PDDQ was actually developed, how it was selected as a framework, and how we worked with HHS ONC to develop this. So the data management maturity model is not the topic of this briefing, but as many of you know, we published the data management maturity model, which is technology and industry neutral, across all industries to be a definitive standard for measuring data quality, data management and data quality capabilities and maturity. So an HHS community of practice was convened in 2015, and it had members from the government, from healthcare provider organizations, vendors, health information exchanges, and industry associations, a group of approximately 20 individuals. And they looked at data management frameworks wherever they could find them in any industry to select one that did encompass the practices that they thought healthcare providers and staff needed most to improve the patient data quality across the entire healthcare organization. And after their process was complete, they had determined that the data management maturity model was the most closely aligned with the needs of the healthcare industry. And that is because the DMM concentrates on behavior, processes, and practices that are performed. It is very fact-based, So it is not based on particular technologies or particular architectural approaches. It's basically results-based. It has a scope that touches the whole organization, from the data entry clerk to the CEO. It concentrates on the business processes, or in this case, the healthcare lifecycle processes for the PDDQ. It contains a built-in path for improvements that represent a typical organization's progress from not doing very much in a specific area, like not having data governance at all, to having robust organization-wide data governance that is efficient and effective. And also, it enables a very quick, precise evaluation of the current state of data management practices in an organization. So for all those reasons, they wanted their publication to be based on the DMM. So here's what we did. We were commissioned to develop this practical, implementable framework based on the DMM, and we wanted to concentrate on the scope of the patient care life cycle in various healthcare organizations, starting with ambulatory care. And the target audiences from small organizations all the way up to huge healthcare systems. Any organization that has patient data, that's managing patient data. So we wanted to describe the behavior that reflected sound data management principles applied to the patient demographic data, identify the specific practices in this context, and suggest example work products that would support the improved capabilities. So we worked closely with the ONC client and our prime contractor, Audacious Inquiry, a healthcare policy firm, to research ONC publications, industry surveys, and studies so we could understand what the key problems were with duplicate records and how to scope the product. We then went back to the DMM and looked at, based on our research, which topics and data management disciplines were most closely aligned to the scope. That is, demographic data, particularly that used for record matching to discover and then fix duplicates. It had to be relevant to the patient care lifecycle and stakeholders, and very critical for assessing and monitoring demographic data quality over time. So our primary source was a publication commissioned by ONC, the Patient Identification and Matching Final Report, published February 7, 2014. And this report looked at various aspects of the healthcare industry as represented by the diagram: provider organizations, consumer groups, government organizations like DOD, the Social Security Administration has health implications, and also the Veterans Administration, health IT and health information management organizations as well. So there were 9 organizations in each category, and extensive interviews were conducted, choosing those 9 to reflect different geographies, different size organizations, those with different vendor partners and different organization types. So they held many conversations, surveys, and structured interviews with those organizations and others who represent key stakeholders. So that was a very long and comprehensive document based in interviews, so we used that as our primary source, and as I said, many other publications and policies. So as a result of analyzing the industry led by our client and analyzing our own data management maturity model, what we came up with was a very streamlined and targeted publication. So we eliminated certain process areas that were less directly related to this solution set, and Jim is going to go through those in some detail. So instead of 25 process areas in the data management maturity model, we skinnied it down to 19 process areas. We also, in the data management maturity model, we had 414 practice statements. So we transformed them into questions, and we have 76 questions in the whole PDDQ versus 414 statements. So it's very tight wrapper for this particular scope. The reason for questions instead of statements is that it kind of invites self-administration. because as Jim will underline later, even very small healthcare practices can benefit from the PDDQ. It elicits discussion because you're posing it in interrogatory fashion, and therefore it encourages stakeholder representation. And we want representation across the whole patient care life cycle, which we'll return to in a moment. We have 5 capability levels in the DMM, and we transform those into 3 capability tiers, representing our client's point of view that most healthcare organizations providing patient care have not yet devoted a lot of attention to advancing data management. So level 1 is foundational, tier 1, tier 2 is building, and tier 3 is advanced, representing very sound and capable practices. So we have 596 example work products in the DMM, the kinds of documents, policies, processes, standards, guidelines, training, etc., that an organization produces as it gains in capability. This became 152 example work products. And finally, the PDDQ, including the glossary at the end, is 96 pages versus 240 pages. And most of those pages are contextual examples, and we'll give you examples of them shortly. So here is what you gain by going through the tier 1 through 3 as a healthcare organization. The more advanced your capabilities are, and the more that stakeholders are engaged in agreeing with those, deciding what they are, and following them across the entire healthcare organization, you gain higher quality in the patient data, reuse of good sound approaches, let's say for monitoring data quality periodically in the systems, and a lot more clarity on the part of the staff. So lots of benefits from following this pathway. Of course, the PDDQ, like the DMM, was designed for a collaborative approach. As you know, managing data is primarily a people problem. It doesn't matter what data stores you have built or what data stores from a vendor you are using, it is what people do that create the data and alter the data for the most part. So you need the people to do the right things and not do the wrong things. Of course, patient data primarily originates in registration, but it can be touched or modified at any point of care through the patient data lifecycle. The staff who are engaged in patient care need to be engaged also in the decisions and understanding about what standards will be used, what formats are going to be used, what a term means within the demographic data set, what the value should be, etc. So the questions are designed to be posed in a group setting with relevant stakeholders involved. And the idea is to gain consensus decisions about the current state so that everybody has the same understanding, the same language. Then you can go forward and establish key processes, standards, and get them approved, agreed to, and followed. Now, long-term, of course, the long-term goal for healthcare is the gradual adoption of very consistent data standards for patient demographic data. And of course, if you have those standards, then you can move to sophisticated standard record matching algorithms. Those two things together would greatly increase interoperability, effective data sharing, better analytics, and minimize duplicates. So that's where HHS ONC wants to go over time. Now, in the PDDQ, we've also advocated a new role. And in the DMM, we talk about the data management function. So in the PDDQ, we're concentrating again on organizations which may be very small, could be a practice with 3 or 4 doctors, a couple of nurses, and supporting staff. So ONC wanted to know who should lead the data quality plans and improvements that are made as the result of using PDDQ. And we worked with them, and they proposed that we have a data quality coordinator posited in the PDDQ, so that each organization, no matter how small, should designate a data quality coordinator. The functions of this role would be to lead an evaluation for the organization against the PDDQ, coordinate process improvement efforts, and a couple of examples are setting up data governance over the patient demographic data, defining the terms in the patient demographic data set, what are the formats, what are the values, what should be entered, developing quality rules that can then be used to look in the data stores to apply rules to check the quality and to discover duplicates, and to create a data quality improvement plan for the organization. So in a very small practice, this could be a part-time individual. In a large practice, it may be an entire group, like in a healthcare system, led by a data quality coordinator. But ONC's point was someone needs to be the owner for all of these efforts to improve the quality of this data. If you establish this role as a healthcare organization, you are demonstrating commitment to better data. So now we're going to talk about who can benefit by employing the PDDQ. Jim?
Yep. So as hopefully is becoming clear here, not only, and I just want to reiterate, so data management is not a technical problem as much as it is, or at least as much as it is, a people problem. And as we look at the people problem within organizations, it's not just down to one individual, and certainly it helps to have skilled and trained staff, but it's an organizational problem. It's how the data is being managed as an asset that moves across the organization, however small or big it is, from system to system. So the target audience for the PDDQ was really designed for organizations. That's why we have those 3-tier levels, who are creating, managing, or aggregating the patient data, or like a master patient index, or MPI as it's referred to. And so it cuts across the entire spectrum of healthcare delivery. You know, where the rubber meets the road is obviously where the patient is being cared for, and so hospitals and health systems is kind of the point of greatest focus, because that's where the patient comes in, gives their information, registers into the hospital or into the facility, and that then becomes the beginning of a chain reaction of other processes that need to link things to that patient. And then often a patient will have to go from one facility to another facility, and so health information organizations are there to facilitate the flow or exchange of that health information about the patient between multiple different stakeholders or organizations that are involved in the delivery or billing for patient care. There are also vendors in the marketplace that focus on master data management, and in particular, in this particular case, what we're talking about is maintaining a master patient index, where there's patient databases that are provided to enable enterprise-wide patient data management within organizations that need to use that patient data. There are also the health information exchanges vendors, and they're the ones who are enabling all the different clinical actors, the doctors, the nurses, the pharmacists, and any other healthcare providers and patients to electronically access and securely share their patient data. So they're contributing quite significantly to improving the flow and the quality of care. And if the data is right, then you get speedy care. And then also the inpatient and outpatient electronic health record vendors. So that's just, these are vendors who are providing data beyond just the electronic record, and providing beyond the patient chart, and expanding on that, and providing all data that's provided from all clinicians that are working with a particular patient. So all of these organizations can benefit from adopting and implementing best practices for data management so that they can have better patient demographic data quality. So I just want to go over what's inside the PDDQ. So Melanie mentioned that our starter point was the DMM, which is it's kind of the larger framework that covers 25 different dimensions of data quality. We didn't need that many for the specific problem of managing patient demographic data, although we do need many, as you can see. So the way that we like to organize is in these categories. So that's what's on the left here. On the left hand of the slide is our categories. And those categories are data governance, data quality, data operations, platform and standards, and supporting processes. And as you can see, as we've indicated, and these are just kind of some of the the descriptions for the interactions that occur in real time within an organization between the processes that you'll see on the right-hand side there. The flow of interaction between data quality and platform and standards is all about quality needs, quality solutions, whereas moving between governance and data quality is about the governance oversight and the metadata and how that contributes directly to the improvement of the quality of the data, et cetera, et cetera. So there's all these different pieces interact organically within an organization, but we've divided them up into these categories so that we can provide a measurement tool. So on the right-hand side, you can see that we have within each of the categories. So there's governance. Well, the process areas that we have in governance include the management of governance activities itself, and that's just focused on how to do or how to measure how well you're doing with governance. It doesn't cover the end-all, be-all of everything you're going to do around governance. That actually cuts all the way through the framework. There are governance activities involved everywhere. Communications, which is really important for communicating up and down and across the organization around data, and data management function is how an organization provides resources, human resources to manage their data as a centralized effort. Could be one person, could be a team, could be a person that has like an extra job, whatever the case may be, and we cover that within the framework at the different tiers. We have higher and higher expectations. Business glossary is very important. It's about managing data as meaning, and that guides your metadata management. And specifically, what it really comes down to is that everybody's using the same nomenclature so that data can flow from system to system without a hitch. That's the goal. Data quality, we include data quality planning. Everything within data quality here, as a matter of fact, everything in here is kind of sequentially ordered so that if you don't have data quality within your organization, or an organization that you're working with needs a data quality implementation, we have here basically an approach that is sequentially ordered that you could follow in doing your own implementation of data quality. So we would expect and want you to start with having a data quality plan. And then from there, the next thing is to investigate the data that you have in your data stores using tools that are designed for doing that. And that's good profiling tools, and also the algorithms that exist in the industry today can be used for profiling in that they identify potential or absolute duplicates. And then data quality assessment is how the business or the practitioners who are delivering the services can assess the quality of the data, and then cleansing and improvement is self-explanatory. Data operations, platform and standards and supporting processes. So requirements definition is really about getting it right up front when you're implementing a new process or system. Data lifecycle management is the flow of data from end to end within your organization. Data provider management is about how you are managing the flow of data coming from usually outside vendors and up and down the chain as you're delivering care to patients. Then moving into data standards. Data standards are using the same kind of codes, and there are a lot of standards that are already out there, but not a lot that have been adopted and used around patient demographic data. So we advocate for that and provide some information about standards that are available today. Then the platform is really about the collection of systems that are used to create, read, update, and delete patient demographic data. Data integration is how organizations pull that data together to be used from a data hub, for example, like a patient data hub. Historical data archiving and retention is about how you maintain records for legal and regulatory purposes. And then the supporting process areas are there. They are more generic practices that we expect organizations to apply to all of the other aspects that I just walked through. So you could apply measurement analysis, process management to every one of those. Now, when you look inside the PDDQ itself, it has a structure to it. It starts with the categories I just mentioned. I just walk you through the process areas that make up each one of the categories. Now, drilling down one more level. Well, first, let me just define here what a category is. A category is nothing more than just a group of process areas. So We usually don't even think about metrics by category, although you can look at it that way. We generally don't. But a process area is really where you start getting into the meat of the framework. So a process area contains common data management goals and practices. And so then we get into the practices. And that's, we have it in green over there because that's the part just to accentuate that this is the meat of the framework. This is where you identify the practices that you have, and that leads to what level of capability that your organization is at. So that's each one of those questions is a practice that's used to evaluate your level of capability. And then we also have example work products. And the example work products are just brief descriptions of a typical artifact. We don't get into a lot of detail or provide too many examples because they can manifest in so many different ways that we found through our experience that it's best just to have a brief generic description. And what's important about the work products is that they're not used for evaluation purposes directly, they're used indirectly. So I just want to ask you to think about your organization or an organization that you're working with or have worked with. And I'm going to go through a couple of these questions. This is pulled from data quality planning. So we start with level or tier 1. Now, tier 1 is, the question is are all relevant stakeholders involved in determining data quality objectives and success criteria for patient demographic data? Now, what we're looking for is we're looking for any project, process, any particular system that was built to support that had stakeholders who were determining data quality objectives. There may be none, there may be one, there may be 5, but in all 5 cases, they were done differently. That's what we're basically looking at level 1 is that if it's done sporadically and not in a consistent way. And then what we would look for is that we would look for any kind of work products that would support that statement. So if there are any data quality plans, criteria, or rules, if we were to find anything that has that would evidence plans, criteria, or rules, then we would feel confident that statement 1.1 is fully met. It doesn't have to have a work product to support it, but it helps. 1.2, does the organization have plans to improve data quality through the application of quality rules? So if you say to yourself, yeah, we have some quality rules, then it'd be important to look for, are those documented? Where do those rules exist? And are there any kind of updates about, on the plans that we have made, has anyone documented any kind of requirements around data quality? So those would be things, and if you don't have them, it's a good, any of these work products are generally a good idea to have them if you don't have them, but again, they're not a requirement in order to meet the statement. At level 2 or tier 2, now we've moved from what we call foundational practices to building practices. Everything here in the framework is meant to accumulate your capability as an organization with the goal of getting to tier level 3. So now at tier 2, what we're looking for is, and I'll just ask the question, has the organization established policies, processes, and guidelines to implement the data quality plan? So when you're asking yourself that question about these policies, processes, and guidelines, start thinking about at tier 2, is this happening at a higher level than tier 1? And you'll have to think about, depending upon the size of your organization, if you're organized by practice areas or departments or lines of business, depending on the nomenclature within your organization. Basically, tier 2 is somewhere between project level and enterprise-wide. So that's what you need to be thinking about with answering this question. And then you'd look for some work products like, is there a sequence plan with milestones? Well, is there, in this case, policies, processes, and guidelines that would be what would support 2.1. And then 2.2 would be more focused on the plan. Is it regularly monitored to evaluate progress? And then the last one, tier 3, so now we're talking about consistently across your organization, or the scope of what you're evaluating within your organization, if it's a very large one, is has the organization defined roles, responsibilities, and accountability for data quality governance and management of data quality processes. So here, and that's a lot of words, and I'll tell you, we boiled down the DMM, as Melanie mentioned, quite significantly, and the goal was just not to miss any key requirements that were directly applicable to patient data quality. So you really have to spend some time thinking about every single part of the question. Defined roles. Do they have responsibilities? Are they held accountable, specifically for data quality governance and for management of data quality processes? So again, Tier 3 is the goal, and we're looking for that question to be met consistently for the scope of the evaluation within your organization. Now, within each practice, there are not just practice evaluation questions. Each one of those questions is supported by an explanation to help you understand what it's about. And it's also included with some healthcare examples. So here's one from data profiling. 2.1 has the organization define an approach and method for profiling a data set. So we don't assume that you know exactly what we mean by data profiling or what's in the question. We provide some contextual information. So here we're talking about what a method is for profiling, that there's some kind of a guide that helps conduct different types of analysis and what their rationale and different applications are. We define for what the goal is and what the steps are, and then provide some examples from patient matching algorithms. See, many of those patient matching algorithms that you have implemented in your organizations can serve as a method for identifying possible duplicates. Because they were designed to resolve them, they are also a good diagnostic for what the current state of your data actually is at the moment. And there are also data quality tools that could possibly employ those rules and expand on them to reach out to other data sets in larger organizations. So now moving on to scoring. So how we do the score is that for each question, the answer is going to be, yes, I entirely do it, or I kind of do it, or I don't do it at all. So we try to keep it simple. Don't want to get too technical, especially in measurement, because if you get too granular in the results, it can give a false sense of precision. So we just try to keep it simple. So if it's full, you get a score number 1, which means 100%, partials 50%, none is 0. Pretty straightforward. Now for each, when we score the questions, then the next thing is that you want to get a total score, because as you move from Tier 1 to Tier 2 to Tier 3, you're going to be accumulating scores. And in some cases, it happens that an organization could have something at tier level 2, but not at 1. And it's possible to have 1 and 3, but not 2. So how do we handle that? Because it's certainly possible, but from the standpoint of measuring capability and that it's cumulative over time, we don't count scores at levels or tiers that are higher than another tier that is incomplete. So you have to have a score of 1 for every tier below the tier that you're looking at in order to get a cumulative score. So if you have a 1 at Tier 1, a 1 at Tier 3, and a 0.5 at Tier 2, your score is 1.5. Okay. Now this is an example of how we do reporting. The online PDDQ score graphic is not like this. This is a Kivia chart. They use a horizontal stack bar chart. But essentially what this does is it shows the colors correspond to the categories. The actual dimensions are the process areas themselves. And you can see the scale from the center to the top is 0 to 5. We don't go beyond 3. So 3 is the target. So the white dashed line is perfection. That's what you, or at least perfection from a framework perspective. We don't expect that any organizations are going to really be perfect. But if you get to level 3, we think you've done enough, and you're really pulling your oar insofar as data management is concerned. So the scores then can fall from between 0 and 3. If it's 0 to 1, you're still at the foundational level. And essentially what that means is that you're managing data as a requirement for projects and processes. Now, if you get a score from 1 to 2, now you're in the building phase. You're on your way to where we would like to see you be, which will contribute significantly to better quality data. And then 2 to 3, if you have north of a score of 2, now the organization is considered to be advanced, and that's going to feature capabilities that comprise completion of all the practices in levels in our tiers 1 and 2, and starting to make progress down the path of satisfying tier 3. And essentially what that means is that now your organization has implemented sound and sustainable program for managing patient demographic data across the healthcare life cycle within the organization.
Okay, so now we're going to...
Yeah, go ahead.
Now we're going to talk about how organizations should use the PDDQ. What is the intention of HHS ONC, and how did we design it to be used? So one of the things that we have noticed across all industries, and this is also true of healthcare, that organizational units within a healthcare providing organization do tend to focus on their own mission. So diagnostic imaging, pharmacy, laboratory, registration, claims, they all want to do a great job in the areas of their influence and span of control. However, the patient data and the patient identification data is, of course, a common thread across the entire organization. So also, the patient data can be, as we mentioned, touched or modified or even re-entered at different points of care across the patient data lifecycle. So it's the problem is doing the data differently from different areas of the organization. And this magnifies the potential for duplicates. Little aside here, overlays are also a problem when 2 patient records are erroneously combined into 1. So that's a different path to getting a problem, but it's also a problem. We're sort of including overlays by extension when we talk about duplicates. It all requires a lot of detection and rework. So the PDDQ questions focus on the processes that are already being performed to some extent somewhere in the healthcare organization. But typically, they've never gotten together to see how they do things, and it hasn't been examined organization-wide. So we advise bringing these stakeholders together so that everyone can identify or raise the issues that they're having with this data, decide how they're doing as a group, and suggest improvements. The role of the data quality coordinator is intended to take the lead on implementation activities, getting the people together, and monitoring the organization's progress. So PDDQ essentially means that healthcare organizations, if they're willing to use it, no longer have to guess about what kind of job they're doing managing the patient data. If you use the PDDQ, you will clearly understand and identify any gaps that you may have in practices that unwittingly may be causing data quality defects and duplicates. Everyone involved will understand that their activities do affect the quality of the data, and not just blame it on the system. It's also the approach to it, the standards that are used, how the data is captured, how the data is monitored, and people do those things, regardless of the vendor or system you may have in-house. It helps everyone create their own awareness as well as a mutual awareness about the practices in all the care areas. And of course, as we mentioned, you can discover useful work products. Let's say registration has a whole guide with procedures and formats for entering this data, but let's say that it's not shared with claims. You might have to modify a record and doesn't have the guide. The PDDQ is a means that you can help to discover the good practices in the organization. And of course, on the human level, everyone has a voice in this, which is why we recommend a collaborative approach. That leads to acceptance of the results, like the consensus on how the organization is doing now, and the willingness to do something to make it better. It also, of course, sets a baseline for monitoring progress and improvements. So when I looked at the PDDQ yesterday, it's at least 70%, maybe 75% contextual information, and the rest of it is the questions and the diagrams and the scoring. So the process area descriptions do contain concept clarification information. We're assuming that a very small ambulatory care practice may have never thought about these issues before in these terms or with these concepts. So we explain everything for people who are not very familiar with data management. Also, the elaborations and information context contains considerations that can be used directly to help you implement. For example, in data provider management, we have a lot of introductory information. This is one paragraph where it's recommending how service level agreements should be established and what they should contain and the minimum expectations they should set. So that's an implementation hint that allows the organization to make rapid progress. So once the gaps and existing strengths have been identified and all stakeholders have been engaged, then the organization can quickly move to establish new capabilities, which are kind of self-evident to them at that point. And I've given a few examples here. So many smaller healthcare organizations don't have any formal data governance. So this is an opportunity to establish data governance. So which care areas will be involved? What are those roles? And how are we going to make future decisions about the patient demographic data? Of course, agreeing on business terms, formats, capture, values, that's very important, and it should be consistent. So they might get to work on that. And of course, the data quality plan, which is their organization-wide plan for how they're going to do everything to improve this data quality. This can include establishing quality rules, new registration procedures, training for staff that touches patient data, profiling data sets, monitoring, and possibly even upgrading or improving the matching algorithms. So it's up to each organization, depending on their current state and what they have to work with, to decide their priorities and what timeline they should use. Now, quickly, if you're a healthcare data professional, the PDDQ can boost your knowledge and practice in a number of ways. So if you are, let's say you work for a consulting firm or you work for a large healthcare system and you're an internal data professional, this will help you speed up your analysis of their capabilities most rapidly, which is very useful for you. It helps you engage stakeholders because we're recommending, and ONC is supporting, that everyone who touches the data should be involved. It does give you collective kind of pre-approval for the initiatives or projects that you recommend because they understand what's wrong. It was substantiated, it was definitive against the PDDQ measurement criteria. They do understand the recommended improvements that you'll suggest, and therefore it helps you get funding and resource commitments to do good things. Typically, if you do a PDDQ evaluation, you can expect opportunities for multiple implementation projects, and these can vary in resource intensivity, in time, whether it's really something you can do quickly, like come up with a new registration procedure, or whether it's something that's going to take longer, like defining all your metadata and capturing it in a repository. So it will vary with the organization. And also, it kind of sets you up for this new role if you're within a healthcare provider organization, the data quality coordinator. That's going to become more prominent with HHS ONC's emphasis on interoperability. So taken together, all of these things can help accelerate your career and help you do a better job for the organization or organizations with whom you work. And our first step here would be log on to the PDDQ, learn it, and master it. It'll prove very useful to you. So if an organization does not wish to use the PDDQ alone, if you would prefer to have an externally facilitated evaluation of how you're doing, then we do offer assistance. We do offer a PDDQ evaluation service. And what we have employed here is the approach and very successful method that we use with organizations in all industries with the DMM. So this includes assistance with preparing the organization, like who should be in the room, which work products do we have, which ones do we need. We do 2 days on site to facilitate workshops of these care area groups, conducting interviews and reviewing work products. And then in 2 weeks, you get a detailed, comprehensive report with specific actionable initiatives so that you can immediately jump into implementation. And of course, it will help you launch data governance and quality improvements. So if you're interested, you'll get these slides, and you can contact us at CMMI Institute. Now, the PDDQ itself, we recommend that after this webinar, as soon as possible, you go to the HHS site. This is the front page, screen grab, and there is the web link for the PDDQ. And you can play with it because it's an online evaluation tool. So you can pick an organization and start evaluating with the online tool. And if you would like to learn more, we have a PDDQ page that contains our PDDQ white paper and an article we just completed on improving patient data quality. And coming soon, we hope to have organizational case studies. So if you're a healthcare organization and you'd like to work with us to do a case study based on your use of the PDDQ, please contact us. Okay, I think we're ready for questions, Anna.
Great. We do have a couple questions that came through, and I just wanted to, one of the questions that we received is actually just what Melanie had mentioned, which is, are these slides available for download? And the answer is yes. We will be emailing all attendees and registrants the recording of this webinar, as well as the slides that Melanie and Jim just presented. And they will also be available on the CMMI Institute website. So we will certainly make sure that you have access to everything that was covered today. So Melanie and Jim, oh, one more thing, if we don't get through all of these questions by 2 o'clock, we will make sure that those are also, all of the questions that come through are answered in the follow-up email. So if your answer wasn't addressed here, it will be addressed in the follow-up email. The first question that came through is, does this cover privacy?
Jim, would you like to address that one?
Yes. So we don't address privacy as a process area, as you probably noticed. However, all of the things that would be needed in order to manage privacy more adequately within an organization are within the PDDQ, because and namely that would be in the areas of the of business glossary, metadata. And another one that comes to mind would be the platform, because we do expect or require that the platform provides the appropriate access to data that conforms with security policies and procedures. So we do look for that, but we don't address privacy as a process area, and that's also partly because we don't get into solutions. We don't have an MDM. We don't have other things that might be considered solutions to data management. This is really about the foundational principles that if you have them in place, you've got a better chance of succeeding at things like privacy.
Next question.
Great. Next question is, how much of this problem goes away if we develop and enforce a patient demographic data standard for a clearly defined data set?
Okay.
I would go ahead.
Go ahead. No, we're probably both chomping at the bit on that one.
Go ahead, Jim.
So, you know, one of the things I love is how hard the industry has worked to technically solve this problem, and no one's been able to do it with 100% accuracy. And the reason for that is that it just proves how much of this is a people problem. So by embracing the standard, and when we're talking about a standard here, and I don't know if the person asking the question is thinking about metadata standards that are shared across different organizations in the healthcare space. That would certainly help, but it's very difficult to bring an entire industry to adopt industry standards. I know Melanie and I both know from our own backgrounds trying to do this, and we've had some success, but not as much success as we would have liked to have seen, because it takes an entire industry a long time to wake up to the need for doing that. So what the PDDQ does is it steps us off into the right direction for creating awareness around data and the things that we do to manage our organizations, to manage the flow of the services that we provide. So that helps make that awareness.
In terms of our research, definitely there have been many good suggestions in the healthcare industry for coming up with a more expanded and definitive data set that would make it easier for matching these records. And data elements that have been proposed are to add mother's maiden name to the data set, make sure that previous phone number is captured or previous address is captured. So because there's no sort of ability to do a national mandate, what you have is different sets of demographic data hosted by different vendors, and that does create a problem industry-wide. So yes, consistent standards would be the foundation for minimizing duplicates across the board. Next question.
Great. Next question. What is the cost and ROI of this framework?
The framework itself is free. It is free and available to the public, thanks to the generosity of HHS ONC, because their interest is that the framework should be adopted by as many healthcare organizations as possible, and that they're happy with it as a path to organizations helping themselves to have better patient data.
Where can we find a printable copy of the PDDQ?
That is a good question, and I think we should get back to you on that. So our deliverable of the PDDQ was in the form of a Word document, and HHS has made that a web-enabled document. So I'm not sure if we're allowed to distribute that or if they have a printed version that they're willing to distribute. So I think we should get back to you on that in an email.
We can address that in the follow-up email. Looks like we have time for one more question, and that is, your glossary does not define quality rule. Small and medium MD practices may not know what you're talking about.
So someone has already read the PDDQ. Congratulations. So quality rules, that's a good addition to the glossary, and we do talk about quality rules in the data profiling and data quality assessment text. Any more questions?
Let me see here. Looks like that's it. We have, it looks like people had additional clarifications through some of the questions they already asked, so we can make sure that we address those in the follow-up email. Great.
Well, thank you very much for attending, everyone.
Yes. Thank you, Melanie and Jim. Thank you, everyone, for your time. And please look for that follow-up email with the answers to the questions that were addressed, the slides, and the recording from today. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.